Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to the TrendSpider Chart Roundup. Today is only going to be a 30-minute session. I have some things I have to take care of personally afterwards. So we're going to get a lot of charts here in the next 30 minutes. And let's just go over the broad markets first, as we always do. If you guys have any charts that you want to see, just post them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. But as always, we need to look at a high-level overview of what the markets are showing. And everybody was thinking the markets were turning over this morning, and then all of a sudden we closed at the high of the day. So the markets have been doing this a lot lately. We've been pulling back into the morning and then really closing near the highs towards the end of the day. So this is another great example of that today. New all-time highs on SPY and the Qs. The main thing that I want to point out here is the fact that we did break out of this previous all-time high resistance back in May before we pulled back into mid-May. And so you can see this acted as an area of resistance multiple times over the last few weeks. And then we finally broke through last week, and we're actually continuing up this week. So if we do continue up, which it does look like that's the case, definitely watch for this resistance line above. What I have here is I've essentially created a alert on this trend line. So I'm just going to remove the alert and we'll redo it. So I have this trend line resistance, a diagonal resistance line above. If we moved up this week, watch for around 430 to 431 on SPY. Now, there's times where we're not going to hit this line exactly on the money. So this is where we can go in and create an alert anytime the price gets around this line. So you can see here that I'm creating this purple area around the trend line, and this allows us to be alerted whenever the price gets anywhere within that purple area. So touch or breakthrough, if you just simply want to know when the price touches anywhere within this purple area, you can use the touch. If you just want to know when the price actually breaks through that red line, you don't really need the sensitivity. You actually need the price to close through that line that we just went over. So then you wouldn't need to use it. Let's just use the sensitivity feature here. That's what I had on before because, we could maybe pull back a little before that this week. And let's add the 10-minute candle here. So that means whenever the 10-minute candle closes in this purple area, we'll be alerted. Make this for 5 days. And now, if the price action gets up to this area, we'll be alerted through our phone or email. So all in all, very strong move today in SPY. This week is kind of crazy with all the expirations at the end of the week with triple witching. So keep that in mind. But one thing that I wanted to point out here, and this is something to definitely start thinking about going into the end of the week, because we won't, I don't think we're going to be doing one next week. I have a baby possibly being born next week, early in the week. So we're just not going to do this next week. So keep this in mind that going into next week, we have some very rough seasonality. So if you've seen these before, remember that we do use the week of the year seasonality sometimes to look and see what's going on into the seasonal side of things. So if I make this a little bigger, you'll see here that this current week, the 25th week of the year, is generally a pretty strong week with this over 60% win rate here. Now, going into the 26th week of the year, we have a 0% win rate. So going into next week is one of the weakest weeks of any week out of the 52 weeks that we have for trading. So keep that in mind. If you remember back in May, the 20th week of the year, we had that huge move to the downside, and that was right in line with that really weak seasonality. So it kind of looks like we could be moving up to set up for a pullback into next week with this weak seasonality. And if we move right up to this resistance zone next week, that would make sense as well. We're going to have the technical side of things and the seasonality, historical seasonality side of things, looking more towards the downside than the upside. Now, going into the Qs, we have something very similar here. So you'll see here, if we look at this broadening formation here, we are almost at the broadening formation resistance here. 345.25 or so is this resistance above, and we're already almost there today. So a really, really strong move in the Qs so far this week. And this is where we really are going to kind of see if we're going to break out, act as resistance for the next couple days, pull back. But the same thing with the Qs. We're moving up into this area of resistance. Now, keep in mind, on the weekly chart, this is setting up for a possibly absolutely just huge move to the upside as we're breaking out of this ascending triangle. So you can see we have this ascending triangle here. If I put a fib from this measured move right here, you'll see that's kind of right in line with this 1.618 extension above, right around 360. So if this really does get going, we could move pretty strong to the upside in the coming week or so. I mean, this week's already setting up very strong. Getting to 360 this week would be a little bit of a stretch, but the market is proving that it is ready to move higher right now. So keep in mind, we are breaking out, but we are also going into a pretty weak time of the year into next week during that 26th week of the year. Now, going into IWM didn't have as strong of a day today as the Qs and SPY had. If we look at the daily chart, you can see here that we have continued to break out of this symmetrical triangle here. And you can see that we did test it last Thursday. We bounced on Friday, and then we had this weird day today. So on the downside, definitely watch for this area below this previous resistance potentially acting as support. And, all in all, the seasonality for the Qs is not 0% into next week. It's about 40%. So IWM definitely is not as it's not as volatile to the downside as SPY and the Qs over the last 5 years. So keep that in mind for small caps. But all in all, SPY and the Qs definitely stole the show here. And it was funny because that kind of reversed. Initially, IWM was green, and then it was actually SPY and the Qs that took over at the end of the day. So that is IWM. VIX is one to keep it in mind anytime you're looking at the broad markets. Going back since the beginning of this year, Monday has been the strong day for VIX. So if you look at the day of the week seasonality even since 2016, Monday has a higher win rate than the rest of the days. So this is going back 5 years, but if you go back since the beginning of this year, you can see the same thing. Monday is definitely the strongest day. You could see that reflected in the green close for VIX today. And it is interesting to see that we do have a green VIX close and the broad markets being green as well. That's something to definitely kind of keep in mind going into the rest of the week, into the week ahead. So we've got VIX. Let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is finally starting to break out a little bit here. I definitely consider these bigger name cryptos like Bitcoin and Ethereum as part of the broad market at this point. So you can see here, if we look at the weekly chart, we definitely are bouncing pretty nicely off of this anchored VWAP from the COVID lows. So you can see here that we've got the COVID lows. I have a pivot here that I've anchored from. I also have another pivot here that I've anchored from. And those that pivot 1 and pivot 2 have been kind of the main level below to watch. And so, this has been kind of the textbook place to bounce. This is where a lot of the I don't want to say shares because we're talking about crypto, but this is where a lot of volume is now holding at break even. Supply dries up, we get our bounce. So all in all, really nice bounce here into this week. We'll have to see if it keeps going. I remember when we were talking about 40K seemed like it would never happen again, and all of a sudden we went to 30K. So we're back at 40K, definitely a psychological area to watch. But for now, the main level I'd be watching would be the anchored VWAP above, right around 45,500 or so. So definitely looking pretty strong on the crypto side. Definitely a little bit of risk-seeking behavior going on as we do get some of that money flowing back into crypto. Ethereum is the next one. Ethereum had a pretty ugly candle. I'm not going to lie. We definitely were looking pretty rough, but into the end of the day on Sunday, we did have a little bit of a bounce to the upside, but still not the best looking the best looking weekly candle last week. Resistance would pretty much be right at these 3 wicks above. So we would really need to get above around 2,800 to get going here. And on the downside, we do have support all the way down here shown by this green trend line way down in the 16 to 1700 area. So definitely some downside if we do flip over to the red again into the coming weeks. And historically speaking, the summer months are just not the greatest time for crypto in general. Since the 2017 highs, looking at the month by month, all of these current months that we're in have a pretty low win rate. So definitely something to consider if you are looking at crypto and looking at some of the seasonality for those. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, those are kind of the main things that I'm going to keep an eye on. Now let's look at some individual names. Home Depot is an interesting one. Home Depot had a pretty rough start to the week, and then we kind of turned it around into the end of the day here. If we anchor a VWAP from this low, you can see that we still are not at this volume weighted average price down here. You can see that we did barely undercut the last week's low. I think we maybe undercut it by like a few cents, honestly. But the main thing here is the daily chart and a couple things here. So one, this is one that I'm trading right now. I think the risk reward is pretty good here. I got the July 16th 320 calls, and I'll show you kind of my thesis here. One, 320 calls from 309 where we closed today is only about 3.8%, so not that far out of the money, and still plenty of time before you really have theta kicking in. And you can see here a nice bounce off that anchored VWAP from this swing low once again, and then this target is right in line with this supply above. So pretty much from 318 all the way up to around 322, we have a lot of supply. So that would make perfect sense as a target above. And that's my target. Just looking for a really strong 1 or 2 day move to get those premiums moving. I'll get out and move on to to the next trade. So Home Depot is definitely looking pretty good. If you look at the kind of falling wedge here, we did have a little bit of a breakout on Friday. Then we pretty much retested that resistance today. So if I zoom in here, you'll be able to see that retest. So we broke out, retested here, bounced, and looking pretty solid into the rest of the week, honestly. So we'll have to see if we get a strong move. But all in all, Home Depot is definitely one to keep in mind. Spotify is another one. Spotify is not one that I'm currently in, but we did have a nice breakout today. And you can see here that we did finally get through that ascending triangle resistance. And you can see that we do have quite a big gap above from this earnings back in late April. So, pretty much exactly what we want to see here. Excuse me, let me charge my phone so I can see the YouTube comments if there are any. But Spotify, again, I mean, this is exactly what you want to see. If we anchor a VWAP from this high, you'll see that we finally are really starting to move up off of it. And that was right in line with this support today. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, going into the monthly seasonality, pretty much since the IPO, you'll see that June has a 100% win rate. So we don't have a lot of months that we're going back and looking here. But, this is a pretty strong month. It's the strongest month of the year since this IPO'd. So not only do we have this nice technical breakout, but we also have a very strong June in general has a 100% win rate. So since this IPO'd, there hasn't been a June that has closed red. So that is Spotify looking pretty good. Another one that is looking decent is Fubo. Fubo kind of had this weird bounce today, and then it closed red. I think just with the with IWM being a little red. But we still have the gap above. Remember, if you ever want to find a gap on the chart, you can use the gap snake. I would set your gap factor to 0.1 so you can find the smaller gaps here. You'll see here that there's still this gap above right around 39.40 or so. And so this is something to keep in mind. I have this launch pad here just to show that the volume by price really acted as a nice base for the price to move up off of 2.5 weeks ago. Initially supply, finally kind of acted as a demand zone, and then we bounced off of it pretty hard. PLTR is another one a lot of people continue to watch. You can see here that we literally closed right at this anchored VWAP from the all-time highs. So you can see this has been an area of interest for sellers in the last week. Back on June 8th, we touched this perfectly. Notice today we actually had a green close, but we still closed below the anchored VWAP. And so if we do break this anchored VWAP, that would be a huge status quo change for the trend here. We've pretty much been below the anchored VWAP since the growth name meltdown started Yeah, this would definitely bring in some new buyers breaking above this. You can't really use seasonality on PLTR since it just IPO'd last year. But if you look at the day of the week seasonality, definitely keep in mind that since the start of this year, Friday has definitely had the highest win rate with a 64% win rate. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Going into midweek, only a 30% win rate for Wednesday. And so we'll have to see if that kind of plays out into midweek where we do get a pullback. But for now, we do have this 48% win rate for Monday and Tuesday. So that is PLTR. Another one that's definitely looking interesting is Apple. Apple's finally starting to break out right through this volume gap here. So remember, we like to use volume gaps a lot using the anchored volume by price from the swing high here. And, you can definitely see that this is something to keep in mind, this volume gap that we are moving through right now. So all in all, we pretty much have this volume gap that we're moving straight through. We do have supply pretty much when we get to around 133 to 135. And yeah, so we'll have to see what happens from here. Now, pretty much all FANG is looking pretty good. Apple's looking good. Facebook pretty much closed at the high of the day here. So all of these things definitely are showing, pretty strong moves into the rest of the week, possibly an all-time high test here. And we'll just have to see what happens. Now, unfortunately, I have to end this a little early. I think so essentially my AC went out yesterday, and so we're getting somebody here on the AC side of things to look at the AC. So I'm going to have to cut this a little early. They got here earlier than I expected. So I'm not sure if the production team is watching, but I am going to have to cut this short now. I think they just rang the doorbell. My dog's going crazy. So I will hand it back over to you guys. I apologize that we had to cut this early. I am just the only one at home, and I'm going to have to deal with this today. So
all good, man. We will see you back next week, next Monday.
We should. That depending on if the baby comes or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, right. But that's hopefully. But we'll definitely be on if there is no baby yet. And I do apologize for having to cut this one short, but just some personal things with the AC I got to go attend to.
No problem, Jake. All right, good luck.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You do the same.
Thanks.